So here's the link to that if anybody would like it. I'm just going to make a little note on our Instagram that we are live.
Mm.
All right. All right, so hello everybody. Welcome to our first day of our Outstanding Members Through the Years panel, where we'll be talking with some extremely wonderful members of NeuroSci who have contributed at the local and national levels over the last few years. So thank you all so much for being here. As a quick little schedule of events, we'll go over some grant and award dates, an introduction of our hosts and panelists, and then we'll do a Q&A between me and the panelists so that you all can get to know them better and all of the amazing things that they've done. And then after that, we'll do a quick little refresh break, and then we'll open up the dialogue to a little less structured and a little more casual. So at any point, feel free to put questions in the chat, either in the Zoom call or in the YouTube, and we will check them out and make sure that your questions are answered. So our undergraduate research grants have passed, but we have our Outstanding Student and Faculty Member of the Year awards coming up on May 2nd, as well as our Chapter of the Year award applications. So those are really awesome opportunities to spotlight somebody that you think is really incredible, which can also be yourself or your chapter. And my name is Tara. My pronouns are they, she, and I am the National Media Chair for NeuroSci. So to get into our panelist introductions, first we have Maya Holman, who is a post-baccalaureate researcher in the Chen Lab at WashU School of Medicine under the guidance of Dr. Xiuming Chen. She's an associate media director with National NeuroSci and is preparing for the 2026 medical school application cycle. In the Chen Lab, she studies inherited retinal diseases and photoreceptor degeneration mechanisms utilizing qPCR, histology, immunohistochemistry, enzymatic assays, cell culture, gene augmentation, and molecular cloning. Previously, Holman worked as a research assistant in the Division of Comparative Medicine and Neuroscience at the Oregon National Primate Research Institute, focused on non-human primate behavioral enrichment and welfare under the guidance of Dr. Christine Coleman. Her undergraduate senior capstone grant proposal was titled Establishing a Theoretical Framework for the Study of Brain-to-Brain Electrical Synchrony Between Teachers and Students in the Language Learning Classroom. During her undergraduate career, Holman was the event coordinator and president of the DePaul University NeuroSci chapter, helping to organize DePaul NRP's 2023 and 2024 Brain Awareness Weeks. She has a passionate dedication for learning, teaching, outreach, and creative problem solving, shown through her numerous volunteer and leadership experiences. Holman is currently volunteering in the surgical pre and post anesthesia care unit at a local hospital and has been an integral part in the development and execution of the NeuroSci Conversations with Neuroscientists podcast series on our YouTube. Formerly, she has been a volunteer and site coordinator for DePaul Community Service Association, an ambassador and senior student ambassador for DePaul College of Science and Health, and a neuroscience program navigator, a 2023 Black and Neuroscience Area Meetup Coordinator in Chicago, an English as a second language tutor with the Heartland Alliance, and provided tutoring and mentorship at the Rohingya Culture Center in Chicago. Additionally, she sells zines at a local bookstore in Chicago and has publications in the works for WUSM's student-run publication Hippocrene, WashU's Science Policy Club Prosper, Research Digest for a new initiative in the ophthalmology department, and an upcoming Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology poster and manuscript on dominant mutations in CRX homeodomain inflict the loss of cone identity. Dr. Janavi Ramesh is a neurology resident at UT Southwestern, having completed her MD at the Medical College of Georgia in May 2024, and currently anticipates to further her career as a neurologist with a neurology fellowship in neuromuscular disorders. Dr. Ramesh received her MS and BS in neuroscience from Georgia State University, where she was president of the NeuroSci chapter at Georgia State from 2016 to 2019. The GSU chapter received the 2019 Chapter of the Year award under her leadership, and she received the Outstanding Student Member of the Year award the following year for her dedication and service to the chapter. During her undergraduate career, Dr. Ramesh was a research assistant with Dr. Maurice Parent, studying the relationship between eating and memory using optogenetic techniques in rats. For this research, she was an author on 2 publications, Post-Meal Optogenetic Inhibition of Dorsal or Ventral Hippocampal pyramidal neurons increases future intake, and inhibiting ventral hippocampal NMDA receptors and ARC increases energy intake in male rats. While in medical school, she presented at the Georgia Neurological Society Conference on neuronal intermediate filament encephalitis, where she was named the American Academy of Neurology Scholarship winner for Best Poster and Presentation. Dr. Ramesh has extensive volunteer and clinical experiences. She has volunteered with the Equality Pediatric and Clinica Latina clinics through MCG, the COVID-19 vaccine clinic at Augusta University, provided enrichment activities with inpatient children at the Children's Hospital of Georgia with student patient allies, was a resilient teens facilitator working with teens on topics of resiliency, stress, and adverse childhood events, and was part of Global Brigade's week-long medical camp in Nicaragua, serving people in underserved rural communities in areas of dentistry, gynecology, and general medicine. Dr. Lorenz Neuwirth is a professor at SUNY Old Westbury and the director of the Neuwirth Lab, where he investigates neurodevelopmental effects of lead poisoning, neurotoxicant exposures, autism, and behavioral neuroscience and behavioral pharmacology, using numerous techniques including behavioral tests, in vivo and in vitro electrophysiology, Western blots, immunohistochemistry, light and confocal microscopy, blood sample analysis, ABS, and behavioral and neuropharmacology. Dr. Neuwirth attended the College of Staten Island for his BA in psychology, MS, master's in philosophy, and PhDs in biology and neuroscience. He has completed 2 postdocs in neurotoxicology, neurodegenerative disorders, and molecular epigenetics from Thomas Jefferson University, and as a Charles E. Scheidt Fellow in the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention at Binghamton University. Dr. Neuwirth has a tremendous amount of passion for teaching, training, creating, and increasing opportunities for neuroscience students, for which he's been recognized as the 2023 NeuroSci Outstanding Member of the Year, the SUNY Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching, and the 2018 Society for Neuroscience and Faculty for Undergraduate Neuroscience Carol Ann Paul Educator of the Year Award. He is an organizing committee faculty member for the SUNY Old Westbury chapter of NeuroSci and the New York and New Jersey Annual Advancing Cross Interdisciplinary Outreach for Neuroscience Conference, which is coming up on May 3rd, so a little plug for that. He's also a faculty research mentor and advisor for the Collegiate Science and Technology Entry Program and the faculty advisor for the Neuropsych Club and Neuropsychology minor, and an extremely active member of the Faculty for Undergraduate Neuroscience, where he is involved in the editorial Approaching Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Faculty for Undergraduate Neuroscience, Are We There Yet?, and received the 2021 Fund Distinguished Service Award. Additionally, he's interested in using technology like virtual reality to teach neuroscience techniques, behavioral testing, and anatomy to neuroscience students. In 2024, Dr. Neuwirth was appointed by New York Governor Kathy Hochul to serve as an educator member for the New York State Advisory Council on Lead Poisoning Prevention, and was nominated and inducted into Sigma Xi, the Scientific Research Honor Society. Our next panelist is Dr. Tom Fisher, who is a professor and the outgoing director of undergraduate neuroscience at Wayne State University and current past president of the NeuroSci National Council, where he served in the presidential role since 2020. He received his BS in psychology from Michigan State University, MA and PhD in psychology with a physiological emphasis from the University of California, Riverside with a thesis in retinal development, and completed a postdoc at Yale University under Dr. Tom Caro in synapses and behavior in aplasia. Prior to beginning his retirement process, the Fisher Lab studied mechanisms of synaptic plasticity and the role of synaptic plasticity in the regulation of neural networks utilizing single-cell neurophysiology techniques. Dr. Fisher has been actively involved in undergraduate curriculum development and scientific outreach. He's played a significant role as an organizer of Detroit Brain Day since 2019, an annual community brain awareness week outreach fair, where he's trained countless undergraduate and graduate neuroscience student volunteers to lead activities for the Detroit community. He was the founding faculty advisor for the Wayne State University NeuroSci chapter and the driver of the annual NeuroSci Student Leadership Summit. At SFM 2024, he collaborated with Dr. Sarah Casella from Loras College and also a former NeuroSci president on the panel Neuroscience Beyond the Classroom, incorporating community-based learning projects into neuroscience courses. And the same year also submitted an abstract to SFN, collaborating with Wayne State University researchers on From Research to Action, the importance of science policy and advocacy in environmental neuroscience, as well as several previous presentations related to engaging the community and youth and student-led neuroscience outreach in the Metro Detroit community. Supporting these goals, he's taught classes that include science advocacy and public engagement and introduction to research practice, served on several committees at the local, state, and national levels of STEM education dedicated towards curriculum development, community engagement, faculty searches, and has provided invaluable insight to the training, connection, and education of students in STEM at all ages. And our last but not least panelist is Avalon Marker, who is a PhD candidate in neuroscience at Brigham Young University. After receiving her Bachelor's of Science in Microbiology with minors in neuroscience and chemistry from Weber State University, not Weaver State as the slide would suggest. After she finishes her PhD in December of 2029, then she hopes to continue as a professor of neuroscience at Weber State University. She has several research experiences, the first of which she received a NeuroSci travel grant for last year on open resource neuroscience textbooks, and specifically focusing on research regarding learning retention of neuroanatomy among undergraduates using multiple leader lines of a single highlighted structure. In June of this year, she'll be working in Dr. Jared Nielsen's lab, focusing on brain lesion mapping and a meta-analysis of the structures involved in various neural syndromes. During her undergraduate career, she was the vice president for the Weber State chapter of NeuroSci, and she's presented at several conferences, including the Research and Engagement Symposium at Weber State University, the Society of Neuroscience 2024 conference in Chicago, the American Society of Microbiology conference in 2024, and the Utah Conference of Undergraduate Research in 2024 at Utah Valley University. She was also valedictorian for the fall 2024 College of Science, an outstanding graduate for the microbiology department and for the University Honors Foundation, departmental and university honors. Oops, sorry. And she has also had numerous other leadership experiences, including being on the Weber State Honors Advisory Board in 2024 and working with the Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Camp from 2020 to 2024. Thank you so much to all of our incredible panelists for being here. Is there anything that you all would like to say to introduce yourselves? I covered a lot.
Think you did a very thorough job. Thank you for those really nice introductions.
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
I
you
will
guys are all
start.
very impressive people. So nice
As are
job.
you.
Thanks.
And I'm very glad to have all of you here. And I will stop talking as much and let you all talk now. So, to get into it, I would love to know what got you all interested in neuroscience.
I don't know if you have an order here, so I'll just jump in.
Go, anybody jump in whenever.
So I'm probably the oldest person on this panel. We don't have to get into how old each of us are. But when I started, there really wasn't neuroscience. There were very, very, very few neuroscience programs that were available. And I was at a major university. I was at Michigan State when I was an undergraduate, and they were just starting a graduate neuroscience program. And so neuroscience was nothing really something that was on anyone's radar. And the way I came about it was, something I tell undergraduates all the time. Find that professor that ignites your passion, because I found that professor. I took a class that just I thought was amazing. I actually went to the professor's office hours, which again, I highly recommend. And we talked. And it wasn't really about the class, but we talked about his career, why he got into it, what research was like. And these were all things I knew nothing about. And so it was really this person that got me into it, it lit that fire, brought me into his lab, not shortly after that, but really served as a mentor from that point forward. And I'm happy to say it's been a lot of years since that's happened. And he and I are still friends to this day.
For me, I took a neurobiology class my junior year of high school. Um, and I had been really interested in sort of the subjective experiences of people and what sort of gives rise to like how different people have different experiences in really similar environments even. Um, and I had been interested in medicine, but I was really interested in neurobiology. So after I took that class, I was like, well, I think I could do this forever, so I might as well major in it. And then when I got to DePaul as a neuro major, the department was really welcoming, the people were great, and I was really just so happy that I chose that major.
I think my pathway is very similar to Maya's. Excuse my voice. I'm recovering from a sore throat, so I sound a little croaky. I'm sorry. But it's very similar to my story. I've always been intrigued by the brain. I think it started more of a neuropsychiatry kind of approach. Why do people think the way they think? And it always seemed very abstract, but at the same time, there was so much more to learn. I heard in passing, somebody said something, I don't quite remember the event or where it was, but someone said, we know more about the moons of Jupiter than we know about what's in our own head. And that just kind of stuck with me because there's so much left to know, and there's so many questions that we can ask endless questions about the brain and the workings of our nervous system, that I thought this is a field where I'd never get bored. So I think that's kind of what propelled me. And I like I knew I was interested in medicine. So what better way, I thought, endless curiosity. I feel like I could chase that in neuroscience and neurology. And like Dr. Fisher was saying, I think mentors make all the difference. So when I started in undergrad at Georgia State, my very introduction to neurology professor just was the nail in the coffin at that time. Or what he slam dunked my interest in neurology. He was so passionate. Went to his office hours, and we just hit it off, and we had a great time. And I think a mentor really takes that passion and makes the difference in carrying it forever. So I still talk to my mentors from day one of undergrad, and I think they make all the difference.
That's awesome. I love hearing your experiences. For me, it was more of a family experience. The family experiences that kind of nudged me towards it. And then I got to where I'm hearing of just like super excitement. My sister, she has a spinal tumor. And so just seeing how that affected her was quite intense. And then throughout high school and the beginning of college, my dad had a really bad car crash or got a bad concussion. And then my brother got 4 concussions in a year, and my sister was dropped 30 feet. So it was like within a course of like 3 years, there's a lot of head injuries and like spinal things. And so I was really intrigued in like how that all worked and how to like help people recover in a long-term scheme of things. And so I just love like studying concussions and like the long-term effects of those. So that's what got me into it.
Yeah, my path was a little bit different. I had a situation where my undergraduate degree program did not have a BS in psych or biopsych, so I was kind of navigating every single class in the major to find out what was about this topic. Finally, fell into a biopsychology class and wanted more, wanted to get hands-on experience, but there were no researchers in the actual faculty who did any of the work. So adjacent to the actual college was a New York State Research Institute facility, and I tried desperately trying to get a job in there to work as a research aide or assistant. That didn't actually pan out every time I applied, and then literally I was walking down the hallways trying to make an extra couple of dollars as an undergrad, and I pulled one of these kind of post-it notes, sticker flyers that we used to do back in the day for like job ads for a mental health counseling assistant in the campus center. Went in for an interview, and then all of a sudden the person interviewing me told me straight up they were not going to give me the job because it looked like my passions were in a different area. And they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I want to get into neuroscience and learn more about it. And literally their husband was retiring from that department in that lab, and I didn't know any of this stuff. And they gave me the numbers to two people to call. Not even 400 feet I walked out of the building, I got a phone call from them with contacts, and I started my career through that laboratory. And that's how I got in it.
Nice. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear kind of all the different perspectives of how, your interest got ignited, whether it was from mentors or from family or from just walking in and getting a job interview or trying to get a job. So that's really, really cool how kind of everybody gets into it. So with that, what was your experience getting into research and kind of getting deeper into your career path, whether that was more research-based, more medicine-based?
I could start.
Sorry, go ahead, Maya. Go ahead.
Okay. I originally was not that interested in research. I was very much into sort of the community involvement piece of it. I loved like being around people and talking with people. Um, so I sort of went to research at first as like this is something I should do just to make sure that I know what the experience is like. And being pre-med, I sort of felt like it was one of those things that you have to do in order to be a good applicant, I guess. But it brought me to the Oregon National Primate Research Center, where I spent the summer sort of doing behavioral observation of baboons and monkeys. And it really showed me that there was a side of research that I did not anticipate. Like in my mind, research had been wet lab, you're pipetting, you're doing molecular biology or cell bio. But for the first time, I was sort of standing 5 feet away from a bunch of monkeys and seeing how they interacted with each other and seeing how their behavior could sort of tell you something about their quality of life and their well-being. And I thought that was really cool. Um, and then I went back to school and I was like, this makes me want to connect with people and do more community outreach, even more so than before. So I stopped doing research for a while. Um, and then towards the end of college, I sort of came to a realization that I like research, but the options that I had at my undergraduate institution were just not really calling to me. I loved neuroscience for the sort of cognitive psychology and like human behavior aspect of it, but the sort of research that most of the professors at DePaul are doing are more in the realm of age-related diseases or traumatic brain injury. And that sort of wasn't where my interests were, but I realized that a lot of them were using genetic models to look at things like Alzheimer's disease. And that piece of it was really fascinating to me, like how different genes can sort of give rise to different diseases or different experiences for people. And through that, I went to the head of the neuroscience department and I was talking with her about how I was interested in doing research. She put me in touch with someone at WashU, and it's been a really amazing experience since then. I really love doing biochemistry and I love the more sort of genetics side of things.
That is awesome, Maya. I love that. It was fun to talk to you recently also and just like hear your experiences during like our little interview that we had. That was awesome. You definitely have a passion for it. So that's really fun. Yeah, I would say what got me into research was there was a couple of things. So there was like a scholarship that was offered at my undergrad for like if you did research, then you get like, a certain amount of money. And so I was like, perfect, I'll do that. I need money, right? And then that just kind of kickstarted like, hey, this is actually really fun. Just like to do, I was doing EEG research with Dr. O'Hare, and then she went on sabbatical, so I went just and did research with Dr. Clark, and that was awesome. It was like microbiology related, and I really became really close to people. So I think the the initial motivation maybe wasn't the best, but then I fell in love with it, and I was very grateful that I had that little bit of a like a funding encouragement. And so now I'm just like super passionate about research in the sense of just asking questions and all of that. We love it. So there you go.
I wish I could track mine back and say, yeah, it was a career goal of mine, but just to say things were different back then. I don't think I had a career goal when I was an undergraduate. I don't. I don't remember having one. I remember being pre-med at one time. And then once I started doing research, I just thought, I really enjoy this. And so I just wanted to keep doing it. And that took me to graduate school, took me to postdoc. But I don't think there was ever a time, especially in my undergraduate years, where I thought, I'm going to be a college professor. In fact, I probably thought not, because I was scared to death of talking in front of people. And that would probably shock my students today, because I teach large lectures, 400 people. It doesn't bother me at all now, but standing in front of 10 people when I was an undergraduate and speaking. So I think, to me, and I've talked to this with undergraduates, asked me this question, how did I get to where I was? And really I just kept doing what I enjoyed. And I don't think there was a pre-thought out path. It was just following, I think someone said it earlier, it was calling me, and it just kind of took me down this road. So I'd like to say it was planned out, and the plans, some of them worked and some of them didn't, but it really was just more of just following what I enjoyed.
It started off as a random email I got from Georgia State University asking for kind of recruiting undergraduate research assistants. So I was, fresh about to start. I said, what the heck, let's do it. So I applied and then sent out a bunch of cold emails to PIs, and kind of certain labs started to interview me and just kind of call me in doing lab tours. And I picked one that seemed really interesting to me, kind of studying the relationship between memory and eating behavior. I think I started pretty much on like week 2 of undergrad, so I didn't know any neuroscience. I just brand new into the lab. I started off washing rat cages and just kind of worked my way up from there. The persistence, showing up every day, and really, I was just really curious to learn. And I had mentors that were curious to teach, and going up from washing their cages to feeding them, eventually to designing projects, executing them, working on posters. I really think it's that longitudinal experience with my mentors who needed people, who needed people to carry their projects forward. And I really, really enjoyed working in that lab. I realized at some point that as much as I enjoyed hands-on like behavioral neuroscience and like designing experiments, executing them, grant writing was not something that I was a fan of. So I said probably MD and not PhD. And I knew that I wanted to do med school, and kind of that's the clinical neuroscience was the route I wanted to take. But I think my aversion to grant writing just kind of solidified that a little bit. And I was like, I love this. And even after I graduated undergrad, I did MS, and I had a year off in between where I was scribing. And my PI reached out to me after, like 2 years after I graduated, and she was like, if you're not doing anything, do you want to come back and like work as a research assistant while you apply for med school? I said, absolutely. Just don't put me on any grant writing. I will be there. So I enjoyed it, and then she supported my entire journey, through med school. So I think that's just kind of how it evolved. I put it all into my research when I was there, but eventually I transitioned into clinical neurology.
Yeah, my original career start point was not neuroscience. I was actually interested in going to school for graphic design and was literally working as a mason, doing construction work. And then eventually the graphic design plans didn't fall the way I wanted to in the schools I was trying to get into in New York. Went right to my local community college, and that's when I fell into a psychology major and then the classes that I talked about before that kind of steered me into the research pathway. What was kind of interesting though was as I was taking all these different classes, I got a lot of experience taking course in developmental disabilities as well as abnormal psychology, trying to figure out how the brain is altered. And that kind of secured my interest and passion to neuroscience, try to figure out as early as possible in the creation of people, why does the brain change in which ways that rob people of such rich existences? And studying neuroscience was something I wanted to do. Got into this laboratory and I was not aware of the possibilities of the environmental conditions that could influence the brain in those ways. Thought it was just genetic only at that point in time. When I met my research mentor and advisor and pretty much lifelong friend, Ted Litsky, who showed me this idea that environmental contaminants of lead and other metals can actually cause developmental disabilities and create psychiatric problems that last a lifetime, and studied them from a clinical perspective and worked with them for a few years. And then I got kind of not so bored, but really I wanted more and it wasn't enough. I wasn't satisfied with that. And then essentially he let me start doing my own research on rodent models of simulated experiences of lead poisoning. And then I was kind of blown away. We had this whole other kind of like beneath the ground laboratory that I never saw before because we were just in the clinic, and then started playing around in that space and really became creative with tinkering around whatever he had in these old boxes because he was near retirement, and essentially wanted to do some of these real cool experiments in electrophysiology. And he challenged me and said, hey, if you want to do that kind of stuff, you figure out how to put it together and then call me when it's done, and then I'll show you how to do the work. So I literally ran out to Barnes and Nobles, got like an electrical engineering manual that you would learn on a naval ship, taught myself in 2.5 weeks how to do all these electrical engineering components, rebuilt the lab downstairs, and basically he gave me the ability to start running my own research. So that's how I got into it, which was really, fascinating, kind of like trial by error learning and do it on your own.
Very cool. I love how kind of all of you had experiences that you just happened upon research rather than like you knew about the field of research and were like really gearing towards it, and kind of all the different ways that you can get into research, and then just the multiple different kinds of research that are out there, whether it's clinical or it's more rodent based or animal based or anything like that. So that's really interesting. And Lorenz, you design all of the Axon websites, right?
I cannot take credit for that.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say maybe you did use the graphic
No.
design a little bit.
I got to hand that to Kasia from Rutgers. She does a good
okay.
job with that. That's her wheelhouse.
Okay. But yeah, and it sounds like mentorship was a really big component for all of you in your kind of fueling your passion to go into research, and how they really cared about you and then supported your questions, and then kind of that mutual give and take of like, oh, I'm curious about this. Oh, well, how can we actually do that? And then like kind of just building off of that. So I think that's really, really cool. And so like kind of building off of that, would you all want to talk about mentorship and how like what mentorship means to you to be a mentor or a mentee, and kind of just your tenets of what mentorship means to you?
I can go. Um, I guess like for me as someone who was a student mentor while I was in undergrad, it was really valuable to me to be able to sort of be a person who had like been in the same situation that people who are sort of like younger than me or on the same path as me were on their way through. When I started college, like I knew I wanted to do neuroscience. I was pretty set on being pre-med, but I had a very strong like arts background. And I was like working for a furniture store at the time, like a design firm. And so I felt very sort of alienated from a lot of the people around me who were also pre-med. I felt like I didn't fit in. And I did not have the same sort of like academic background that a lot of the people around me did. So I felt like I struggled a lot and I didn't necessarily have the best mentorship to sort of get me through the first couple years of college. And then things sort of changed when I started getting more involved in the neuroscience department at DePaul. I think there are a lot of professors who are super passionate and came from really diverse backgrounds, like career-wise. A lot of them had not necessarily started in research or had the original goal to be a PI. So they sort of empathized with coming from somewhere completely different and having to adapt to that environment. And many of my professors were my best mentors throughout that time. And because of that, I felt like it was super important to sort of pay it forward. I did a lot of different types of volunteering, but it was like mainly with kids or underclassmen at DePaul. And there's something so rewarding to me about like being able to check in with someone who might be going through a hard time and really communicating to them that like the things that they're going through right now, other people have gone through them too, and they are things that can be overcome. But obviously, when you're going through something and you feel alone, it doesn't necessarily feel like you can ever get to the next step sometimes. Um, so I would say like mentorship in my life has been something that I always felt like I was on one side of or another side of, and something that has been really integral to my sort of growth as a student and as a learner, but also something that I just feel like is so necessary to success in really any field, but especially in academia or for someone who's pursuing medicine. It's like you can be smart and you can have passions, but it's really hard to get somewhere when you don't really know what you're doing and you don't have the right people around you to give you confidence.
Great. I think I had a very similar experience. I have immense gratitude for my mentors, and I always say, you know, they took someone who knew nothing and made me into something. Because I just think they are able to see what interests we have. I think that the most important trait of a mentor is one who can kind of identify what does this person want, and not just what they want out of them, but like what does my mentee want out of me, and trying to tailor experiences to that, tailor their guidance and mentorship to that. And I think I, like Dr. Fisher, was very unsure of myself, or like I wouldn't say unsure, but I was very nervous. And I personally was very unsure of myself. And I think my mentors were really important in nurturing that confidence to kind of pursue, you know, you're coming into the lab wanting to be a doctor, like, let's get you there. You know, they were very, very nurturing of my confidence and my abilities. And I think tailoring experiences to fit our needs, and always staying on top of it. Like, I wouldn't be the one looking up conferences that are happening and saying, I want to present here, I want to present there. I think the first step when the mentor finds a couple of conferences, and like, I think this is a good regional one for you to start with your first poster. Let me help you get started on your first poster, and kind of starting from there all the way to what can I do to help you get into med school, like all the way, you know, to that level. So I think I took a lot of that experience and I try to give it back, you know, in terms of having peer mentees in med school, like as a fourth year mentoring first years, or in med school mentoring undergraduate students, or even trying to be a part of this panel. I just like this, I guess, is one attempt in trying to talk about my experiences and figuring out what people would like to hear and how I can help them. But I think really having mentors that are receptive to feedback, that goes both ways, is really, really valuable. And I'm grateful to have had such mentors.
Yeah, I love how you talked about that. Just what stood out to me is the whole receptivity to feedback. I think that's so important, like on both ends. And that has made the difference for me, like in positive mentors versus someone who didn't make it as much of an impact, is that we had like a communication that was like open, and we could, I just felt like I could be imperfect in front of them and say, hey, I want to learn this, but I don't have the ability on my own, and just dive in. One mentor that really stands out to me is Dr. Clark. I actually took like 7 classes from him, as well as like um just doing research with him, and just how he had always this mindset of like, let's just get out there and try it. And if it doesn't work, we can alter it and try it again. And he was someone who would always, like you were talking about, just kind of throw out like, hey, there's a conference coming up. Like, do you want to try it out? And it was just nice because I don't think I've had like even half the experiences in research so far without just a mentor like him, which is awesome. And so, and I think so like in my undergrad, obviously you guys are so far along compared to me, but in my undergraduate, just having I think 4 different like true research mentors there. I had like a different variety of experiences where I saw just like communication made such a big difference, and it was amazing. So that's, I don't remember what the exact question was other than just what was the impact that mentors made. And I would say that's the impact that it made, just communication for sure.
I'll just say it's hard. I mean, being a mentor is hard. Um, I've had good ones, I've had bad ones. I think Avalon, I like some of the things you just said about things that you appreciate, the communication, but also there's that element of allowing that space to fail and learning from your failures, right? And it's like a try it, and that to me is also important. And finding those balancing acts is tough. And I just think in terms of lab environments and things like that, where I think the mentorship becomes a little bit more personal to me, where I've seen it work best is when mentorship isn't necessarily a person, but it's a community. So the best that I've seen are in lab groups where the mentorship is coming from your peers. It may be coming from people more experienced from you. It's also coming from your PI. Everyone will have that, slightly different perspective, that different way of communicating, things that you can or cannot say, right? And I think, it's like it takes a village, right? Sometimes, gosh, someone said that before, I think. It's not original. But as an individual mentor, mentoring students, it's hard. And I don't think everybody is good at it, and some people don't care to be good at it, and other people are great at it. It's another one of, I think, those personal things that you value personally is really going to determine how good of a mentor you really are. It's your values.
Yeah, I concur. And to kind of build off of that, in my multiple levels of growth that I went through, many different programs, there was a couple of common denominators for me in terms of mentors. One was that I always sought after mentors who were the most challenging and most difficult professors to pass courses or to work underneath, because of the amount of work that they did or the challenge that they put on students. And I sought mentors like that, as well as the mentors that really had no care in the world of who you were, what we were about, and they treated you as individuals. And anything that they could have used as a bias was completely off the table. And what after was, will you step up to the challenge, and how will you overcome the failures that they set up? And I had a lot of mentors who allowed me to grow in that way, with that kind of catch and release technique, where they let me do a lot of things. I would fail, come back, and it wouldn't be a problem, but they would be teaching me lessons like, make sure you plan out better next time, because the more you do these things and the more you do fail, they are associated with costs and resources. And you don't want to be in a situation later on where you can't finish things. or create too many things that can't be finished, which will collapse any type of thing you try to do later on, whether you work under somebody or work on your own. And then what I think was one of the most valuable skills that I got from my mentors, which is kind of repeated across the differences of the degrees that I went through and experiences in labs, was the idea that you could literally complete any research project with little to no money. And it was a very different mindset than what happens today, which is you have to bank on all the fancy technology that's out there. And optogenetics, for example, you could be trained in optogenetics, but then when you go on a research career pathway and you can't land a grant to purchase that equipment if it's not at the institution you get hired, you have no technique to offer in that facility. So I was taught a whole different approach, which was think very simply, do experiments to cost you little to no money and do them very well so you could do many of them, and sometimes it might lead to money, and then you could do more cool things with money, but don't rely on it. The money should not be your main point of focus. And that resonated with me for years, where I still work with equipment from like the 1970s, and I repair and rebuild it just so I don't have to put out money to buy new stuff. And I think those lessons were completely rich and are pretty much a forgotten art in today's world.
Just want to add, I miss those days.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. I heard kind of like a few different things, and it was kind of this like really openness to different experiences, being it giving the opportunities to fail, learning the communication styles of your mentee and what may work best, giving back, reflection, being receptive to feedback, and kind of this be imperfect and be challenged at the same time, and like being able to be imperfect while meeting a challenge. And because there is no growth without mistakes and some kind of failure in some way. And I heard something recently that kind of just like, I don't know, maybe it fits in here, but it was like, don't view mistakes as like, oh, how am I not going to make mistakes, but rather what mistakes am I going to make, and like being able to do that. And yeah, I think that Lorenz and Tom, I think that you both have been incredible mentors, and just from working with Maya, I know that she has done an incredible job as a mentor, and I've heard great things about you, Avalon, and Janabi, about all the things that you have done, and the ways that you've kind of given back and also been given to, and especially kind of in those situations where you didn't really know what you didn't know going into it. So that's really awesome, and I'm really glad that you all have had such mentor experiences of being a mentee and being a mentor. So kind of in a similar vein, what are some of your tenets of leadership, and what's some leadership that has been really impactful to you, and that what do you feel is kind of your strength as a leader? Because I think that leaders can be all different things, but yeah, so whoever wants to start.
I guess I'll start on this one, where for me, I think I intentionally look for students to support research opportunities with, or pull underneath my wings, so to speak, who are not the students who would be the quintessential A straight students, but they're kind of somewhere in the middle of the pack, where they're not so certain of what opportunities could arise. And I look at those students as a potential larger growth that could happen. And I value, as one of my tenets, of creating a customized, kind of individualized mentorship for each person that I bring into my lab. And I work with about 10 to 12 people a year. So it's all primarily undergrads. And my main goal with them is not just teach them neuroscience and to be successful and get better grades and eventually turn on that switch, which naturally kind of happens as you go through the progress. But for me, it's more about how could they become confident in who they are and what they do with that knowledge base that they're growing as a foundation. And then how do they acquire a certain level of skill sets that can make them marketable and ready for the next level. And then I use my laboratory and that kind of catch and release approach I talked about before to make them fail almost in contrived ways multiple times and often. So in the safe space I create, they can overcome the challenges that they might not be prepared for when they transition away, where environments may not be so supportive. They may be more cutthroat, so to speak, or more restrictive or more authoritative, and they may fail immediately with those kinds of transitions. So having them increase the confidence, getting better skill sets, and being prepared for those kind of transitions by being welcoming failure, and you learn more from failures than you do successes, I think really prepares them for the next level, whichever way they go.
Kind of a fun perspective, like the whole creating space where they can fail and just like almost creating like situations where you know that they will in a way, so that when they get out, it's like they're stronger as a result. It's almost like the analogy of like putting a tree in a windstorm frequently and seeing how much stronger the tree is compared to if it was always in a greenhouse and like a safe place, because then it's a lot more prepared. So I like that. I also want to say we want to hear your thoughts too, Tara. So don't you just sit in the corner. But I think when it comes to like leadership, I was thinking about it. There's one book that I read. It's called Essentialism. It's by I think it's Greg McKeown, and he just talks about how to like do less but get more done in a lot of ways, like how to focus on what's truly essential. And that came to mind in the sense of like how do we like be a leader that they like our people really need in a way, our mentees and so forth. And so what kind of it boiled down to is I feel like a a good rule of thumb that I try and apply is like 90% listening and 10% talking, and just like observing and listening and watching and like seeing what's happening, and then doing 10% of talking and getting it done, and like focusing on what really matters most. So I think my biggest mistakes in life so far have been when I've just, I don't know, railroaded the process, or just like went faster than the project was ready for, instead of just sitting back and observing a lot more, doing more gathering of information first. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. That's my main tenet of leadership. Listen more and speak less.
I'm so
I
glad you said, oh, sorry, Maya.
you can go ahead.
Oh no, I'm so glad you said that, Avalon, about listen more. I think a great leader always listens. I'm sure that's something that we've heard a lot. And honestly, this is an aspect where I feel like I could use more work. I still feel like there's a lot to learn in terms of being a good leader personally. And the 2 years that I spent as president of NeuroSci, I think was my most formative in terms of learning how to be a leader. That was my first ever real leadership position. I think I was probably VP of the honors college, which is a very small group before that of like maybe 10, 15 people. And I felt like it was more of a group effort than NeuroSci, which was a lot bigger. But I really have my team to thank for that. My VPs and my faculty mentor, they knew this was my first real leadership position. And I think they really had my back, listening to their guidance, listening to what the members wanted. And I think it ultimately just comes down to I think what people expect out of a leader is like take all the opinions, maybe come to a decision or a conclusion that's favorable to most. So if we can do that with taking in opinions and just taking that one final step, I think is the first step to a great leader. Considering everyone's opinions, of course. And that's really one main takeaway that I learned was just listen more. There's so much to learn from our peers, not just like peers and teams or team members. So more definitely would love to hear more from others who are great leaders.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic, like leadership in the context of different types of work. I minored in entrepreneurship, so I got the opportunity to take a lot of management classes, and I did a program in executive leadership at DePaul's Business School, which was such a cool experience and very focused on more a pure business sort of industry context of leadership. And I've noticed that what defines a leader in business is very different from maybe science, or I think especially research. Leadership, like as Avalon said and Janavi has said, in research, you sort of need to learn through failing a lot. And a lot of the growth that I feel like I have gone through while doing research has really been building confidence around my ability to fail and learn from failures and move on and sort of adapt to the fact that things might not always go the way that I want them to. And that's not necessarily a reflection on my abilities or like whether or not I should be doing what I'm doing. And I think a good leader in science and research is somebody who can sort of encourage a little bit of failure and then also be there to sort of debrief and help to sort of continue pushing their mentee forward. And I think in a sort of a broader context, a great leader is definitely somebody who can communicate very well and somebody who has like a very high level ability to coordinate between different types of people and different groups of people. And the best leaders that I've worked with and learned from thus far are people who just really have like a personableness and an ability to communicate with people that lets them not only listen and sort of help bring to light a lot of different perspectives in a room, but also to identify different people's strengths within a group. And I think it's absolutely true that the best leaders are not usually the person who is the smartest person in the room necessarily, or the most talented at a specific thing that might make them really stand out in that environment. But ultimately, a leader is not usually the person who's doing the like boots on the ground labor work. They're the people who are able to be like, oh, this person's really good at this assay, or this person is amazing at this one specific thing. And I'm going to connect them with somebody who needs that help so that everything can get done more efficiently. So I think leadership, like to me, the most impactful leaders I've seen and the most like excited and energized I've been to be on a team of people has been when the leader is very sort of down to earth and present in a way that lets them connect really deeply with people and also be somebody that people sort of just naturally turn to as this person is probably going to know what we should do. And I trust that their ideas on what we should do next are going to push the entire group forward versus like, I believe that this person is going to be really good at their job, or that if I let this person do something instead of me, that they'll do it right, because that's not necessarily leadership. That's more like being codependent on somebody to get something done. And I think leaders really push people forward in a hands-off way that is really powerful.
That was great. Gosh, I shouldn't even try to follow that. But first, it was great. I'll just add a couple things. One, if you end up in academia and start attending faculty meetings, good leaders are organized with their time. They don't waste your time. They're intentional about their time. There's nothing worse than sitting through a meeting where, oh, what are we going to talk about next? I don't know. And believe me, those happen. But I think also, and I've been blessed to work on some big projects here at Wayne State with some truly effective leaders. And I think one of the most effective strategies I've seen is really beginning the organization of the group talking about goals and values. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? What are our shared goals? What are our shared values? And how do we work towards those? Then everything, and once those are agreed on as a group, everything then filters to that common set. I worked on a committee where we redid the general education program at Wayne State. It's the first reorganization. It's the common curriculum that everybody takes. Very politically charged committee. It was, but it was an incredible experience. But that's how we started, and that's how I think we got it right. Is we started with, what are our values as an institution? What are our goals as an institution? And how do we work that way? And every meeting was organized around those lines. And so it's knowing what your goals are, it's knowing where you're moving. But it's also, the practical thing, and this is I think another highly valued thing in a leader is being organized and intentional. And trust me, when you sit through enough faculty meetings, you value those people more than you value most other things you'll come across.
Nice. Yeah, I've been
Ending the meeting on time too is always big. My heroes.
Yeah, I've been like taking notes because this is one of my first leadership positions. So I know that I have had my own moments because leadership is definitely a skill that you kind of build over time and get better at, hopefully, as long as you're actually taking in the feedback. But I think that you all had really interesting and good points about leadership. And I think the point that you made, Maya, about how leadership looks different in different spaces is really interesting to think about, because I don't know that I've particularly thought about it a lot, but definitely the listen more and talk less, and being really intentional and kind of like customizing the experience to what exactly the situation calls for, whether you are, you know, leading one group versus another, if you're more of a business group versus more of a research group, and those two may look different in how you lead them. But building confidence and being observant are two things that I heard kind of echoing throughout things, which are very important, and like being able to recognize strengths. And I love supporting my folks on my team, and I've learned so much from them. And like one of my mentors, Dr. Leslie Tolbert, I remember I was one of her preceptors and her TA, and she had told me, or she told all of us in our first meeting, she's like, we're all peers here. We're not this hierarchical thing. Like, I want to learn from you just as much as you all want to learn from me. And to have a tenured faculty professor tell me that, I was like, oh. And she really wanted us to use her first name, which took a few minutes. It took a few weeks to like get over the hump about like, oh, am I going to call my professor Leslie? But it ended up being really great. And I owe so much to her, and just like how much her perspective opened up my perspective. And all of you are opening up my perspective even more too. And I really appreciate all of the different insights that you all have had into how leadership affects you and what you all feel makes a good leader. I'm trying to figure out which direction to go next, because I think that there are so many cool ways that we could go. But I think that maybe I'd love to know, what are some real moments of joy that you all have had in your careers? Because I think that there has been a lot of mention about failure and different types of failure and how that contributes to growth. And I think that it's kind of equally important to talk about. And I think that you all have also mentioned moments of joy, but I want to be really intentional about kind of naming the joys in your career and your education, and kind of the things that keep you going every day. Like, what's exciting about getting up every day and going to your job or just your education?
I think my joys have nothing to do with neuroscience. It's the people. It's the people I work with, working, running into lab and seeing the friendly faces. All of our experiments would be crashing and burning. It did not matter, but I just loved going to work every day because we are all crashing and burning together. So I think the lab parties, celebrating graduate students' dissertations, it's all the celebrations. It's all, going to the PI's house for holiday parties. And it's just growing together, laughing together, crying together. We did it all together. And I think that is the most joyful thing then and now, as a resident. Now the gratifying and the joy, all of that comes from patients. The ones that get to go home, or the way they look at you when you can hand them their discharge papers is all the joy I need to go at 5 a.m. the next day. So that's I have everyone, everything to thank to them. They thank me profusely, but I have them to thank for trusting me. So I think it's always the people, recipients versus, like, there's no recipient and giver. It's the people that we meet and work with every day.
I would say I love when something really cool happens. Like some of my most proud moments from undergrad, like being involved with neurosci, we got he was a neuroinfectious disease expert to come talk about long COVID, and it drew like one of the biggest crowds we've had for an event of that nature. And it was just so cool to see something topical and relevant happening in the community and so many people showing up to sort of benefit from that information and really get to like sit down and learn something that impacts their life. For me, like my proudest moments are when I get to sort of bring people information that is helpful and relevant to them and like really see in real time how beneficial it is to the community around me. Like that's so exciting for me. Um, and even now, like I work in a research lab and we do basic science research. So it's not like I get to walk around the hospital or go to the eye clinic and see patients every day, but I've ran into people sort of like walking around in St. Louis even, and I tell them like, oh, I'm at WashU, and they're like, oh my gosh, I know someone who has an inherited retinal disease, or I've met people like even back home visiting family just out in passing, and they're like, oh my gosh, I see an ophthalmologist, I have like this condition, and it's so amazing that you're involved in this work because it's something that is really personal to my life. And I'm like, it's so cool to like be able to connect with somebody off something as random as like, oh, I happen to do research in this really niche area, and to see how big of an impact that work actually makes on people's lives, because I don't personally have a retinal disease, but to meet people who've had their entire lives like thrown off course or altered, where they have to go get an injection in their eye once a week or something because they have some disease, and to see how grateful and happy people are to sort of have a connection with somebody about that and be able to sort of share and confide about these really serious things that can happen in their life, really energizes me. It's like literally the reason I like wake up in the morning and leave the house is because I love to be able to make an impact in other people's lives and to show them that they're not alone in something. And I think research and neuroscience especially are such a powerful way of bridging connections with people.
And Maya has also done a fantastic job at researching folks to spotlight and doing a great job of bringing them into the circle.
I love doing
And
it. I love it when they have to talk to me and I get to ask them a bunch of
yeah, and you do a great job. And Maya is always asking questions about like, oh, well, what if we did this? And what if we did this? And I feel like you do a great job of making sure that needs are met. And yeah, that energizes me.
That's awesome. I love how you, Janavi and Maya, you both talked about like connection and like people, like having the parties at your PI's house and stuff like that. That's interesting. It just reminds me how how much like social creatures we really are, how much we need people, and like just how if we're completely isolated, like life is miserable. Like, do not put me in a room alone for 12 days, like it was COVID. Anyway, but um, something that I think about, like that I've been thinking about is just like the small successes. Like in the semesters that have been really, really hard for me, or just like the projects, I'll like to just find the littlest, smallest things that I was like, that was a success. And I'm very grateful for those little small successes. Those are honestly what keep me going. Like some days I'll just sit back and like, if it's a really hard day, I'll just say, okay, what are the things that went well today? I'm like, okay, well, my toe is not hurting today. So not that it ever has, but just like being excited about those little things really makes a big difference for me. Just like, I guess gratitude maybe is what I'm thinking of, like gratitude for the small things because small things are happening all the time. Like the sky's always blue and the sun's out. So that's what I think brings me happiness daily.
Yeah, I could kind of maybe construct it in three ways. So for me, selfishly, I find great joy with creating new challenges every single day to walk into a lab and try to solve on my own. And I get to be the first person to figure out if it works or not. And that's exhilarating in and of itself. Unselfishly, in the role of an academic and being a teacher, is the idea of convincing people to care about a curriculum that they may not have interest in, or it may not be their major, it may not be something that they're going to traditionally like, but they may find some interest in. And how do you connect with people in a very disconnected kind of curriculum? So one thing about neuroscience being so integrated helps many levers you could pull on to try to draw people into the space. And that's one of the fun joys of trying to see who's not paying attention to how to draw you in. And I could pick you out of a crowd and try to work in that way in the classroom, which I find to be really a unique challenge to draw in that interest. And the third, and probably more telling, I think, in many ways, is the rewards that we give to like the next gen, in the sense that when I train my students, they move on to masters and have you. It's quite interesting to see how successful they are when they go to that next level. And some of the tips and tricks that I do with that customized mentoring, I can see bear fruit because when we tinker around and make our own stuff in these low cost kind of environments, in one case example that really stands out to me is a student of mine who went into a master's program in neuroscience thereafter and started building like their own kind of tetrodes to do some recording devices and auditory cortex of rats, and was tinkering out with their master's degree trying to design that technology, and then all of a sudden did it, completed it, was fine. It could have been a patented product. And then essentially the program moved them up from a master's right into a PhD and started using the technology right away, got a Nature paper. And it was unreal that they were just pushed so fast through the curriculum in that way. And they came back to me, were saying, it was what that ingenuity and creativity that you kept pushing at on me when I was an undergrad really paid off. And that kind of stuff that you get are these like real gems in life that don't really need money or anything like that to pay you back as you pay it forward to mentoring. I think that's really what drives me.
Tom, you still thinking? I'm happy to talk for a few if
Oh
you're
no,
still gathering.
I didn't realize I didn't speak yet on this. I think the common denominator, I wouldn't say it is people, right? It's the people you come across, it's celebrating their successes, and that sort of thing. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. No one, mentions, well, is you write a paper and you get that letter saying you're accepted, and it makes you feel good, but I don't know if I would describe that as joy. Even though it's a good feeling because, everything it's a lot of those accomplishments in science are anticlimactic where you put in all of the work and then even I hate to tell those people getting your PhD now, but that day you get it, you'll feel happy, but it's okay, that was it, huh? For all those years. But it's celebrating others, it's celebrating their accomplishments, it's celebrating the students that you see walk across the stage, that what they went through to get themselves to that point where they could walk across the stage. I think all of those things, are where at least reflecting back on my career, those are the things I remember more than, when I got a grant or a paper published. It's all about people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that that's a theme that I heard everybody say. And kind of like going back to community. I feel like a lot of what I've talked about with folks this year has been community, and it's really cool to see and like to hear about all of your different experiences about both the impact that you're having on community and the impact that community is having on you, whether that is um you know, your teammates or the folks that you're working directly with or people that you come across the street, or, you know, like you're having an impact in so many different ways that may not be so obvious right off the bat. But yeah, I love that. And I love that kind of all of it goes back to others and like how others impact you and how you impact others. And um the gratitude aspect. I think that that's really interesting because especially since Dr. O'Hare worked with gratitude too, like I think that that's like so interesting that you worked in her lab and like had thoughts about like how a lot of your stuff goes back to gratitude. And I love that Janavi, you've had experiences with the having parties with your lab. Like that's such a low pressure way to connect and make things like what Tom was saying about like, yeah, work is work essentially, you know, and what makes work so gratifying is oftentimes the people that you work with. And I love the point that you made, Lorenz, about training the next generation. And I think that especially in all of the work that you do, like that's a lot of what I see is about training the next generation to be creative and to solve challenges and just creating different opportunities that are so important that, you know, you may not get anywhere else. So yeah, I really appreciate all of your different perspectives. And I'm very glad that we have this little community where we can all talk about this today. Because I don't know, like you all make my day being here and chatting with me. And yeah, so thank you all. I think kind of maybe like as some last questions, would you like to walk us through a day in your life about like what does your day look like? Because I feel like all of you are kind of doing different things and at different stages of your career and looking at different things. So what does it look like to be in a day of the life of you?
Think I'll start because I'm probably the odd one out. So we'll get mine out of the way. I just finished rotation in the ICU, the medicine ICU. So my day, I mean, I would go in at 5:30. I would get handoff from the night residents who spent the night putting out any fires in the ICU. And I would just kind of take over care around like 6 and do my pre-charting, pre-rounding. So kind of reading about the events that went on overnight first on their electronic chart, and then I would go see the patients. Unfortunately, I wake them all up before 7. Ironically, the ICU is not a place where you can get much rest. I didn't design it that way, but doctors are in and out all night long, and I unfortunately am part of the problem where the doctors are part of the problem where we walk in at 7 a.m. and wake up these patients, and I, ask them how their night was, and invariably the answer is I never got any sleep, and then I apologize, and then I check up on them, and and then we come back to the room. We round with the attending, where we kind of go over their active problems. What are we going to do for the day? The ICU is a very active place, which I saw, like this was my first experience there. And it's very different from the general wards where you only address maybe one problem at a time, one thing at a time, make one med modification and see how that affects them. But the ICU, you're turning like 10 knobs at the same time, doing a lot of little micro changes, seeing how, and then you observe the effect the very same day. It can be on a scale of minutes to hours, and then you make changes all day long. You just hope that nothing irreversible happens. You're trying to stay on top of it. So I think it's a very, very, at least now I just finished a very high pressure rotation. But I think I had a lot to learn from my patients and their families. And I think that the ICU is a place where you can really, really get to know your patients and their families. It's something that taught me that this is a regular day in my life where this is a regular work day for me, but this is the worst day of their life for the patients and their families. And I think remembering that every day when I go into work, that this is just a regular day for me, but this is not for the people that I'm working with, or, my patients and their families. So that is something that I'll always remember, that I can't take anything else that happens outside of the patient's room into their, because what they don't want to hear that. They only want to see what is relevant to their loved one's life. And I think that kind of compartmentalization, but it's also important that I don't bring too much home, that I'm not, insanely chart checking when I'm off, when I'm away from the hospital, because it's important to compartmentalize work-life balance, and I can't bring everything home. I'm always thinking about them, but I can't, burden my family with what I see at work, because they need me in a different light. So it's all a learning process. I learn from them, they learn from me, and I learn from my senior residents, my attendings. So this is kind of how a day in the life of an ICU resident is.
I could go next. Up until very recently, when I took the MCAT on Saturday, so I was on an insane schedule for a while, but I'm usually the very first person to lab in the morning. I wake up at like 6 in the morning and I work out, and then I go in so I can have a few hours of quiet. Um, and we do mouse work, so I usually stop first thing at the mouse colony and just check up on things, and then I go to the lab. Um, Usually I'll spend the first half of my day doing sort of administrative work. I update all my spreadsheets and I check my email and I make plans for the afternoon. And then most of the afternoon is usually spent either, there's a lot of seminars and educational things. So some days I'll be in a lecture for a couple hours, but most of the time I'm just running experiments and checking in with various lab members about things and ordering supplies and all the regular upkeep. And then I'll leave lab. I volunteer in the evenings usually. So I'll either go to volunteer or I'll go home and study or have a meeting for the media team or edit videos, things like that.
It's like I'm going. Okay, so I'm kind of in a unique stage right this moment. So I graduated with my bachelor's in December, and then I'm starting PhD in June. And so these past like 6 months, or they're going to be 6 months, I've just been like doing everything that wanted to do that I couldn't do for like four years, right? And so typical day right now is so much different than it will be in like 3 months, right? But here's my typical day. So I'll get up at like 6 and I'll do 2 hours of reading, which is fantastic. I'll just have so much fun with that. And then I'm back at home with family. And so I'll just like do like an hour or 2 hours of just like housework. And my mom has been like just very grateful for it, which is fun. So I'm like, oh yeah, like a whole like just helping the family. And then there's just like taking my sisters to school and like helping around the house and working with my dad, which has been fantastic. So just like lots of random things. And then I'm like on a soccer league right now just for fun. And I bought a car yesterday because I know, crazy. So this honestly lots of like decompressing before PhD starts because I've heard that it's insane, absolutely insane, like doing everything. But it's honestly been the best, just like best time ever, just to have these months to just relax in a way and just do everything that I hope to do. Like we've played pickleball a couple times and I'm like, oh, that was fun, and without the worry about like turning in assignments on time and stuff. So anyway, kind of a strange time of life to have to say all that I'm doing in a day, but just kind of it's nice to get 8 hours of sleep. That's all I gotta say. It's nice. So, so yeah, that's what my life is. But in June I'll start, and then I'll just be like, you know, diving in full force. So there you go.
I gotta piggyback on you because mine's even worse. Because mine won't come back. I've started my retirement, so I'm like half time right now, and I'll be half time for a couple more years.
That is so exciting.
So it's kind of like what you're doing, but I'm not going back in June. So, but I just wanted to follow up with something Janavi said, which I think is very important. I mean, when I was, more full time, I mean, I wanted to make sure everything was compartmentalized. Here's time for this, time for this, time for this. And so my time was very structured, but I think one of the most important things to set aside time for is when you go home, that you're home. that you be home, you be present with your family, your loved ones. You need to have that time. And I had a mentor, and again, great mentor, and he was very firm on it. He said, look, when you're here, you work your butt off. We work hard when we're here, but when you go home, you're home because you need that time. And I always thought that was very valuable advice, and I always tried to practice it. I didn't try to bring my work home. Sometimes it's impossible, but if you try, most times it's possible. So I would just urge anybody out there, it's like, yeah, work hard when it's time to work, but make sure you keep that time set aside so that when you're home, you're home.
Yeah, I think that's a absolutely great point, Tom. Uh, the way I kind of go through my day is kind of make every second count, which is really, I think, extreme, but it plays into that idea. So when I am home, I can be home. I have two little kids, so it's important to have that crucial time with them and not lose it just because of a job. And one of the things I've realized in academia is that although you want to be social and have community and work amongst many different people across different things, conversations eat up your time, meetings eat up your time, and not all of them are necessary. So I'm like a to-do list person where I knock out as much things I have to do on those lists to free up a lot more of my personal time later. And then if I do have time within the confined amount of hours I'm at the job, then I will do those social things. If not, it's task oriented and that's it. So I may not be accessible to some people because of that, but if you schedule it with me, I'll afford you that time as necessary. But I'm really, really cautious of my time because in academia, it easily can be pulled away from you in seconds. So that's just one major thing I try to utilize. And then I have very long commutes. So I try to push off some like phone call related meetings, Zoom meetings, whatever, on the long commutes back and forth, or set up business calls so that doesn't eat up my day more. So I'm kind of capitalizing on time fragments that I can not get back. And that's really just a strategy.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting how you all navigate your days, and it sounds like, and maybe this is not true in practice, but it sounds like that you all have gotten pretty decent at a work-life balance. I'm sure that that isn't always the case, but at least intentionality towards moving towards that, and like being able to take your time to do what you need to do and like fitting your schedule how it works. So thank you for sharing what your days look like. And kind of my last question is, what's your advice for undergraduate neuroscience students, whether they want to get into research or they're just getting started in neuroscience and don't know what they don't know, like many of us did when we first started. Um, yeah.
I think the biggest thing I always tell them is make sure you do that thing before you do it. So if you're getting, it made no sense, did it? But if you're thinking about doing research, get involved in a research lab. Find out what it's like. Find out what that's life is like. Talk to graduate students. Go to office hours. Learn about it before you make that jump because it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard path. If you want to go to medical school, it's a hard path. And again, there are ways to get an idea of what's in front of you before you do it. And so that's one nice thing about being an undergraduate. And it's almost, I think, a critical part of the undergraduate experience. And something that neurosci also can play a really important role in bringing together, mentors that may be medical students or graduate students. We do this at Wayne State as part of our neurosci activities. And just so you learn, because what you have to do is there's more today, I think, than during my day. Like I said, it was a lot easier when I was a student. These days, the ecosystem is a lot more challenging. It's a lot more competitive, and quite frankly, it's a lot more uncertain. And you really, really have to go in eyes wide open, and think very hard about your path before you commit. And I think that's a little different today than it was when I was a student. So it's a little tougher, but I think groups like Neurosci are there to help you learn about these things.
I would say, sort of in that vein, don't be afraid to pursue your interests. I think, especially in the current sort of climate, it's difficult to make time for everything that it feels like you should be doing, especially if you're pursuing grad school or med school. And there's like certain prerequisites or things that you know you'll be expected to have done or know how to do. It can be really easy to sort of think if you spend any time doing things outside of school or outside of volunteering and work, that it is a waste of time. But I think this has come up a lot throughout this conversation, even that if you don't make time for the sort of non-career, non-academic things that really help to support your well-being and your sense of who you are as an individual person, then you will get burned out and you won't be as happy and you might miss opportunities that you would come to if you're really on a path of like, I'm doing what I love to do and I'm doing what's important to me and I'm being really intentional about the time that I spend doing all those various things. And I don't think it's ever a bad idea to pursue your interests, but I think you also have to be really intentional about what is worth your time and what isn't really aligned with who you are and what your goals are.
Yeah, I love how you talked about that, Maya, like taking time to make sure you breathe almost and like don't always focus on career, don't always focus on the pursuit of knowledge. I think, yeah, going like adding that to that, it's the idea of like taking time to think and like play and do things that are not related to work. Because I think it's like the constant redirection. I think of the analogy of if a plane starts their course like 5% off, then they're going to be like 1,000 miles away from their destination by the time they get there sometimes, if they're going around the world. Or just like they can be way off course in a little while if they don't redirect every little bit. And so that's the same thing in our lives, is if we don't stop and redirect, we don't know where we're going to end up. And so just taking the time to constantly and just continually like setting aside time to just think, where do I actually want to go? Or am I actually going where I want to be? And just reassessing. I think that that's probably the most important thing I would tell a undergraduate student. Like, don't get caught up in the rush of things. Like, make sure you don't. So
Same lines what Evelyn was saying. Even if your path diverges in undergrad, embrace it. You know, take that diversion, see if it leads to a better place. Sometimes that 5 degree off course might actually, you might end up in the destination that you like better. So even if your path is a very twisty, convoluted one, so be it. You may end up somewhere where you didn't plan, but you might love it. So embrace the course changes. I always say nothing is that serious. Honestly, it's not, nothing is that serious. So take it all, like I always, someone told me this in med school, it's pass fail. So now med schools have become pass fail and we're all typical type A students. So I've had all my mentors and all my peers were like, it's pass fail. It's nothing is that serious. So it's same way in undergrad, take the diversion, see where it goes, and find mentors that if you need to be readjusted, it's okay to be readjusted. So that would be my best thing. Pounce on every opportunity and take every diversion and see where it goes.
Yeah, I concur. Be very opportunistic. Embrace the opportunities, fail often. You'll value success in that kind of aspect. And then essentially understand that one of the main things students require is this ability to earn their own confidence. It's the hardest thing to gain, the easiest thing to lose. And that's one of the biggest telltales of transitions from undergrad and elsewhere. If they capitalize on those sorts of opportunities to do that, then they'll reach a state about being bold and confident, and that will serve them well as they move through their careers.
Awesome. I think that you all have such an incredible perspective, and I love kind of all the different little nuggets of incredible knowledge that I think will be really impactful on our members. So we will kind of break out into kind of a less structured conversation now, but I do just want to thank you all so, so much for being here because you all do have such an amazing perspective. And I love how different all of your paths have kind of been, but kind of similar in same way in some ways. And just all of the insight that you all bring is so, so valuable. And yeah, I really appreciate you all. And is there anything that anybody would like to close with before we kind of get a little more casual?
I'll just say I can't stay for the more informal part. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Tara, for moderating this great conversation. And it was really great to hear everyone's perspectives. It's always really exciting to see sort of what lessons people have to bring from all of our various unique experiences. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do. You're so great.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Maya.
I will also say that I had another event start at 6:30 my time, so I might
Yeah.
step out.
Yeah. Go do what
Because-
you need to do. If anybody needs to leave or
Okay.
take a short break, go for it.
Okay.
Thank you so
This
much.
has been awesome. I